And welcome everyone to an NABC chat. I'm Andy Katz, pleased to be joined by Craig Robinson, the executive director of the NABC. And Craig, as we approach March Madness, finally getting here after a year, not having it a year ago, I just want to get a sense from you about how you think coaches have managed this unprecedented season of trying to deal with all the COVID protocols, multiple pauses. It feels like almost everyone in some form has had to deal with either a cancellation not of their own doing, or it has been their doing. So they've had to navigate an unprecedented season.
Yeah, Andy. Well, it's great to be with you and great to see you. And I am just thrilled that we've gotten to where we are. Here we are in March, right? And all season long, we have encouraged our coaches to be flexible and to understand there are going to be competitive disadvantages and just be prepared for things that they're not normally prepared for. But most of all, let's make our student athletes' safety and well-being the top priority. And overall, it feels like, and I believe our sport has collectively done an excellent job in navigating this unprecedented season.
You know, one example, and this I just came upon last week when I was doing a game between Marquette and UConn that I thought was a good example of a coach thinking out of the box like this. So North Carolina needed a game. Steve Wojciechowski said, you know what? I want to give my players something to do where they feel like, hey, this was a memorable moment. So they took them up on the offer. They go play at the Dean Dome. They end up winning. They then spend 2 days hanging out, at Duke practicing, and then they went up to UConn. And it was an example like that. And I know other coaches are trying to find or have tried to find other ways to make it a more enjoyable experience in light of everything that we're going through.
Yeah, Andy, and we paid a lot of attention to that. I thought Coach Wojo did a wonderful job in sort of being flexible enough to take advantage of that opportunity. And we've had all of our coaches who are trying to do things. And Andy, this isn't just Division I. It's Division II, NAIA. And I just, at the beginning, you and I talked about this, and I challenged our membership before the season that our coaches' voices would set the tone for how the season was viewed. And I'm just so proud of how many coaches have remained positive, have looked for opportunities to give their student athletes an opportunity that they wouldn't necessarily have. Our coaches have publicly endorsed the necessity for virus precautions, and it really feels from our vantage point that coaches were part of the solution.
All right, so as we turn to the postseason at the Division I level, a lot of restrictions that are going to be in place, very strict to get to Indianapolis, and then once you are there, I know there's obviously some chatter among coaches of, we're going to need some sort of mental health release of being outside, getting air, literally. And that is one aspect of still sort of being negotiated of how much controlled air can they get players and coaches for their own mental health as an escape. That's one thing. And then obviously we've got, the NIT aspect, which now is going to be in Dallas or the Dallas area. You've got a mask mandate and 100% open being lifted by the state of Texas, by the governor, balancing that with, the rules and regs of being in the NIT. How are you trying to balance that in terms of advising and consulting the coaches?
Well, and I'm going to answer that, but I want to say this first, that the NCAA has been tremendous in this whole process with regard to the NABC. They have remained in regular dialogue with us throughout the season on their plans for March Madness. And we're grateful to the NCAA for their hard work pulling this event together, and have complete confidence in their ability to manage a successful tournament. But Andy, to answer your question, many of the same priorities for the regular season will remain in place. And we are just continuing to tell our coaches to trust the medical experts and comply with the protocols. We need to be flexible with these differences in this year's tournament as compared to normal years. And we need to emphasize the importance of safe behavior with our teams and I will tell you, the NCAA has shared some of the things that they're planning to do for the teams that make it to the tournament to make the experience great. And I can tell you, the student athletes that I've talked to, plus the coaches, are really excited about it.
The sort of backup teams, when we get to that point, I mean, there had to be a plan B if someone were to, test positive and cannot compete. What are your thoughts in terms of how coaches will handle that those top 4 NIT teams are sort of on standby to potentially get into the NCAA tournament?
Listen, I think our coaches are so excited that this tournament is in place that I suspect that there will be strict following of protocols so that we don't ever have to use this rule. And I'll steal a note from Dan Gavitt on he put in place a really good alternative that we hope we never have to use.
The other thing too that I think we can definitely applaud is that we've had very few officials test positive. They were always sort of the group that we didn't really talk about, but they affect the game as much as anyone, because if there was an official, and we had a couple of games like this where they test positive and it affects the teams and the coaches, and they may have to go and miss a couple of games. Your thoughts on the way the officials have handled this, as well as being really all in with the coaches and the players?
Yeah, well, again, it comes down to the plan that the NCAA set out in the first place. I think the protocols are sort of help the guidelines, and then the officials of all, they should know how important the rules are, and they are just they've done a terrific job in keeping their own houses in order. And it's I really appreciate you bringing it up, because it's not something we get to discuss much, and the officials should be applauded for the work that they're doing. And I think the way the NCAA tournament's set up, once that everybody gets in the controlled environment, it is even more likely to be successful once everything is set and the tournament starts.
And one last thing, Craig, just overall, when we get to April 3rd and 5th, and we've got a Final Four, and then we crown a championship on the 5th, when you look back at what that coaching staff has had to go through to get to that point, I firmly believe there should be no asterisk, because this will be harder than anyone has ever done in all aspects of trying to compete for a championship. What are your thoughts on what that will mean to that coach, that staff, or coaches and staffs that get to those final 2 days?
Well, I got to tell you, Andy, I'm in agreement with you. Watching coaches cut down nets and student athletes celebrating a national champion after this is going to be something to remember. I think our coaches will set themselves apart from all the other coaches just for the reason you said. This has been one of the hardest seasons that I've ever seen and ever been a part of. And again, I think the student athletes, the coaches, and the NCAA all should be applauded on getting us to the finish line. Now, we're not there yet, but I got to tell you, the team that's still standing at the end will really have accomplished something this year.
Appreciate it, Craig. Stay safe.
Thanks. You too, Andy.